I've never been the type to nap, not even when I was a child. I would stay awake during nap time when all the other kids in kindergarten would be passed out. After getting wrapped up in all sorts of supernatural cases, naps ambushed me. I would be in the office trying to stay on top of paperwork when I would suddenly jerk awake unaware of when I had fallen asleep. Jimmy would normally let me get sleep when I was able. She tried her best to do whatever paperwork she was able help with on top of her other duties. Getting another person for the office may need to happen soon in the future if we couldn't keep up with the workload. An agent came into the office while I was sleeping. He sat with Jimmy, sipping a coffee as he waited for me to wake up. As I finally woke, I looked over his face, which was hidden under some sunglasses, and I tried to remember his name. He was a numbered agent, so looked very much like all of his brothers. He wasn't 706, whom I'd met before. Honestly, he was pleasantly surprised that I could tell the difference between some of them. Standing up, he introduced himself as 526, an older brother of 706. Overall, he was friendly enough. I've heard that the numbered agents recently had a bit of a personality shift after their parent became less strict with them. Some even left the corporation to do other jobs, causing there to be an even heavier caseload on the remaining agents. No wonder why they had let a human work on some jobs. They were really lacking in employees. You've been requested by someone in holding. I imagine it is to look over their case, 526 said, explaining why he was there. Holding sounded a lot like jail. After working on so many cases, I didn't know how arresting supernatural creatures worked. I assumed they had rights to a trial like humans. Or maybe, trials weren't needed if they were caught red-handed eating or killing people. If that happened, most of the time the creature was killed instead of being arrested based on my experience. I go back to Murmur from an earlier case. He had killed his abusive employer that had made him and his family slaves. So far, I've heard no word on if he was arrested or not. Aside from all that, I didn't have any clue on why someone would want to talk to me about a case. You'll need to leave behind any magic or metal items. It's similar to visiting a human in prison. You shouldn't be worried. It is a very safe place and you'll be behind a reinforced glass wall the entire time. I wasn't worried until 526 said all of that. My mind was filled with ideas about all the sorts of monsters I may come across. I could refuse this, but I also wanted to know what it was all about just as much as it scared me. Jimmy promised to take care of my wallet and cell phone until I got back. 526 set up the door to my office to connect to the holding building's door. He told me only certain people had access to this opening. Him and his brothers weren't overly powerful aside from a very small handful, so they were normally forced to run around opening doors for others. If Nick was good at magic, that might have also been his job. I debated on if I should have sent Nick a message. He'd been cleared to start working again after the weakness in his legs had gone away. So far, I was just checking to see what someone wanted from me. I wasn't running a real job and would contact him after I got back to the office depending on what was said. 526 guided me to a front desk. I needed to sign in and have someone do a quick pat-down to ensure I wasn't carrying in anything dangerous, mostly for my own safety. The agent stayed behind until I was finished. He needed to open a way back to my office because I couldn't. At least near the front check-in desk there were 2 chairs and some magazines. The building was pretty clean and modern. The white walls were almost too bright to look at. Cameras and spellwork lined the hallway. The one who did the pat-down showed me to a door and opened it. He stayed near the door, watching and listening to the entire future exchange. The room was pretty bare. A chair was bolted to the floor, facing a wall with a glass window. Instead of a phone, the window had a speaker in the middle. The person who made the request was already there, sitting on the other side, nervous as hell. He wasn't the monster I thought I would see. He was younger, maybe only 20. His eyes were a striking shade of green and he had reddish-brown hair. He wasn't extremely handsome like the other human-like creatures I've met. I sat down and he was almost too nervous to speak. "Have we met before?" I asked him, not knowing why I was called over. "No, never. I heard about a human working as a contract worker and thought I might try my luck. All the agents are also busy. My request is on the bottom of the pile. And I figured a human might look at what happened in a different way." His voice was strained. He was in a prison after all. His lips were chapped and chewed on, along with his fingernails, which were nibbled down to a painful shortness. Even while he spoke, he kept raising a hand to chew on a fingernail before remembering they were already too short and wincing in pain. I didn't know how I felt about people talking about me so much that he had heard about a human working for the corporation while in prison. "What can I help with? I don't promise results, but I'll do what I can," I said, and he relaxed a little. "I'm Robin Rice. They might have told you, but probably not. I'm a half-breed. My mother was human but passed away when I was born. And my father is a false Wendigo." "A false one?" I asked, never hearing the term before. Robin nodded, and he seemed perfectly fine explaining the whole thing instead of being upset that the person he'd put his hopes on didn't know about something so important. "Lately, the Wendigo myth has been really twisted from what it really..." I don't know too much about the original indigenous legends, but I know they're not the deer skull creature most now think of wendigos. As far as everyone is aware, there hasn't been recorded proof that a creature like the one described in the legends was ever real. It is possible they were and simply died off. But there are creatures that live in the woods that are very similar to what people now think of as wendigos. They've always worn skulls, but have started to take a liking to deer skulls. They're tall, thin, pale things that can mimic human voices to lure in victims to eat, not raw most of the time. They like to cook people. I was really put off when I found out I was related to that sort of thing. It explains why I'm able to eat so much and not gain weight. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like finding out you were half supernatural creature. Jimmy knew from the start what her father was, and he even helped raise her until he was killed. This didn't have much to do with why I was there, but I did want to know a bit more. How did you find out? You were adopted, right? I mean, with your mother gone, I doubt your father could raise you without you thinking something was going on. My mother's best friends raised me. They were the ones who found her after she went missing in the woods. When I turned 18, I wanted to know who my father was. They spilled the truth and I honestly thought they were crazy. It explained a lot about myself if it was true, but I refused to believe that a monster in the woods assaulted my mother before her friends rescued her. I wanted to know the truth, so I went to where it happened and volunteered as a park ranger of sorts. My parents were pretty upset I went behind their back to go to a place they thought was dangerous. I quickly found who I assumed to be my father. He never gets close, just stands off in the woods watching. I listened patiently as Robin needed to stop due to stress. His face grew pale thinking about coming across a long-lost parent. I didn't want to rush him, but I also didn't know if we had a time limit and if I would need to come back tomorrow to hear the rest. He looked up, ready to go on. I kept going back every summer. I actually liked doing the outdoor volunteer work, and the creature never got close, so it felt safe. I wanted to learn more about him. I really didn't want to think he harmed my mother, even if he was a monster. All of that led to why I'm here. Some campers, they went missing, and their remains were found inside a fire pit. A sick feeling came over me as I knew what he meant. Some campers died, but that didn't explain why Robin was arrested. Wouldn't his father be more of a suspect in the case? Half-breeds did gain some of their parents' traits. That didn't mean Robin was strong enough to overpower a few people and murder them. He knew the question was hovering in the air and he let out a long, tired-sounding sigh. I'm being treated fine here. They couldn't rule me out off the bat. I was put here for observation. The agents in charge of my case started to look through the woods for my father, but needed to leave for a more pressing matter. If no more campers die, it proves I'm guilty. But if someone is killed while I'm here, I'll be released. That's just not right. They should have finished your case first. This is no way to treat someone. I was appalled at what I just heard. Robin shook his head, not having the energy to get worked up. He understood how bad this all sounded, but he could do nothing but accept it. You work for the corporation. You know how overloaded they are. If a case comes up that has more lives at risk, the priorities shift. I don't want anyone else to die though. I was hoping you could go by the site and look it over to check if there are any signs they missed. Only in the daytime though, it's too dangerous at night. If you can find some sort of proof that a different creature is in those woods, maybe they'll shut down the campground or something. But I understand if you don't want to take this request. As far as you know, I'm working with my father. I could be sending you to him to be eaten. That last point was something I didn't consider. I fully trusted Robin from the moment he started talking. It was a risk, but I did want to keep trusting him. At least if I went looking, I might be able to find the real monster behind all of this and try to put an end to it all, regardless if Robin was working along with the murderer or not. If Nick wasn't available, I would need to go on my own though. I'll look around for you. Maybe I'll be able to lure it out. I can't sit around doing nothing when people are in danger. The guard at the back of the room signaled our time was almost up. Robin's face brightened a little and his eyes welled up. He had called me over, but didn't really have much hope that I would listen. He had been through a lot since he was locked up. Not only was he stressed out about people getting hurt, he was worried it was his biological father doing it. That weighed down on him, causing him to stress about what kind of person he was if that was where he came from. After this case was sorted and he was out, I would sit down and talk with him so he knew DNA really didn't matter. We were forced to make some quick goodbyes as he was taken away back to his room. I came out from the hallway to find 526 deep in a National Geographic. He quickly stood when he saw me. A little embarrassed, someone noticed he was interested in something besides case work. Can I ask to borrow you for a little bit longer? I said, hoping he could get me to where I needed to go. With his help, I arrived to the very small town where Robin spent his summers. 526 gave his cell phone number to call when I was ready to be picked up. He also was able to take out a gun with some special bullets because Nick wasn't answering his phone. I would start this job without him. He held onto the gun I used for work, and 526 thought I needed a better one than the regular handgun I owned. I was very thankful for all of his help. Without another agent on my side, it would be tricky getting this job started. He wasn't able to stay though. I had used up enough of his time, so I let 526 go off to a different job. Someone really ought to give him a nickname. Maybe I could think of one later. I rented out a room first, not knowing how long I would be there for. Before arriving, I dropped by my place to grab what I needed to hike through the woods. God, I really hated the woods. Creatures really needed to stop hanging around them. At least I wouldn't be hanging around them in the dark this time.
The campground wasn't too busy.
After people were found murdered and eaten, not too many wanted to be in those woods.
I checked into the ranger's station to see what information I could dig up.
They did close the campgrounds, but lacked the manpower to fully enforce that rule. No regular visitors were staying, but they had found some people sneaking in at night with cameras, trying to get content for their YouTube channels or their podcasts. During the day, the trails were open. You were required to sign in and make a note of when you left with an estimated time to return. It was easy to see that not knowing who or what had killed the campers was really weighing down on the rangers who stayed. I thanked them and promised I would be out of the woods by nightfall. The first day was spent walking around, looking for anything the other agents might have missed. They had left pretty quickly, so didn't really put much of an effort into looking for other creatures in the woods. The rangers had been out every day along with the regular police looking for anything that might help with the case. The issue was that they were looking for a human murderer. I was not. Some creatures couldn't be seen by humans unless they wanted to be seen. Since I worked with the supernatural so often, you could say I had gained a better sight for this sort of thing. I might see something the human rangers had missed. I was hopeful the first day. Somehow, I stumbled on the crime scene. The caution tape was still up after all the evidence had already been removed. To respect the site, I only looked at it from behind the tape. The fire pit was dug out and the ash was taken, and yet it was clear it was there at one point. If I didn't know what kind of gruesome act happened in those woods, I would find the place peaceful. The silence and stillness of the forest was sinister when you were aware something in the trees hunted and ate humans. Standing there, I thought back to a dilemma I hadn't really focused on for a while. There were creatures out there that killed and ate humans, and at the same time they were very kind people. Killing was just in their nature, something they needed to do to live. Charlotte was one of the nicest creatures I'd ever come across, and in order to have children she had to kill a human male in order to hatch her eggs inside him. It made my skin crawl. Was it alright just to say we were different species so it didn't matter? That they could be killers and yet kind-hearted at the same time. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. I wondered about Robin's mother. Did she escape on her own, or was she rescued? And why did Robin's biological father not eat her? I was stuck without answers for a while. Not until I found out what was in those woods. When the sun started to set, I left to head back to the motel. Everything was within walking distance, so I didn't need to rent a car during the case. My dinner was a sandwich from the diner that was pretty much attached to the motel. The room itself wasn't much, but at least it was clean. The cell reception was fine so I could stay caught up on work while on my phone. No matter how many emails I read and replied to, it was like a never-ending battle. When I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer, I turned in for the night. I was a bit disappointed in the lack of progress for the day, but I hoped I could get more tomorrow. Something woke me up a few hours later. Being in a strange room confused me for a minute until I remembered where I was. I didn't dare turn on the light. Taking a hold of the gun under my pillow, I crawled towards the window, trying to peek from under the curtains and hoping whatever woke me wouldn't notice. The thin material barely kept out the light of the neon motel sign. I knew I heard something just outside the room. The motel was only one floor and I regretted getting a room so close to the woods. I didn't even know any magic to keep my door locked against creatures. I froze, my body turning to ice when a shape appeared outside the window. A tall, thin person just outside. A hand rose with long fingers to touch the window. The head ducked down, causing me to muffle a gasp. A skull with antlers could clearly be seen through the curtains. I could hear the creature dragging a finger over the glass in a circle. I knew the thing just made a spell on the glass. I darted to the door. Bracing myself, I opened it ready to confront the monster, gun raised. My hand shook slightly as I rushed outside to look at my window to see nothing. No creature standing outside without any trace of it. Feeling a set of eyes on my neck, I looked just in time to see a tall, pale shape go behind some trees off on the other side of the parking lot. Crouching down to where I thought the creature was drawing the circle, I breathed on the glass, fogging it up. For a brief moment, I saw some spell work in a language I didn't understand. When I fogged up the glass a second time to try and take a photo, the entire thing didn't show up again. That thing could have come into my room while I was sleeping. So why didn't it? What was the spell for? I should have gotten another room. It was only a few hours until dawn, so I went back inside and stayed up for the rest of the night, ready to go back to the woods for answers as soon as the sun came up. The thing in the woods knew I was there. Without any kind of proof, I couldn't get Robin free. I was tired, but I laced up my boots and got ready to go hiking and try to find what I had come across the night before. Instead of the trail, I started where I thought I saw the shape disappear last night. Some dirt was disturbed, showing I was on the right track. My hiking and tracking skills were pretty much non-existent. I should only go a few steps into the woods. If I could no longer see the motel, I'd gone too far. The last thing anyone needed was for me to get lost. Before heading into the trees, I sent Nick another message. It wasn't like him to not reply. Even on busy jobs, he did his best to send a message back letting me know if he wasn't able to talk. The day was already pretty hot. The season was getting closer to autumn without any sign of the heat going away anytime soon. The short hike didn't really provide any more clues. The footprints could just be from a very tall human. It didn't prove a monster was in those woods. I was about to turn back to see if there was a way I could lure the creature out, when laughing came from above the trees. Wind blew, making it impossible to pin down the sound. The unaddressed trauma of dealing with the witch caused me to react. I ran behind a tree, frantic to try and hide. When the laughter got closer, I ran again. My mind soon caught up to my body, forcing me to stop. My poor reaction had caused me to get completely lost in the woods already. Looking around, I thought a path looked familiar, so I went for it. I needed to get out of the woods and not just run around blindly. That laughter followed. It was as if 100 school children were all playing at once, different from the bone-chilling witch laugh. And yet it was something I didn't want to hear in the woods. My sense of direction turned out to be utterly useless. The way I picked led deeper into the trees, that laughter mocking my every step. A fluttering came down from the trees. At first, I assumed it was a leaf and brushed it off. When something grabbed my hand, I turned trying to see what it was. Countless shapes came down from the treetops, that devilish giggling getting closer. They swarmed my sight, blinding me. I was unable to get the flapping dark shapes away as I walked backwards and right down a gully. Slipping without anything to grab a hold of, I tumbled down. My ankle got caught on an exposed root and twisted painfully before I reached the bottom. It was by sheer luck that I didn't smash my head in. While I was recovering, the laughter stopped. All those shapes landed on top of the gully, staring down at where I landed. Now that they were staying still, I could see what they were. Cursing myself, I recognized them. One fluttered down, larger than the rest. It could fit inside the palm of my hand. Holding out my hand, it landed on it. It had 8 wings made of what looked to be dark, nearly black leaves. The body was long and brown, matching bark. It was also similar to a butterfly body, just with a more human top half and face. They pretended to be shadows under leaves, so were called fluttershades. A few have been inside my office requesting food. They eat rotting flesh of animals inside the forest. Sometimes they would steal anything campers left unguarded. I wish they would have just told me what they were before freaking me out like that. "You are the Sky Man. We've heard of you," the creature said, its many arms nervously fiddling. "Our prank was not fun for you. You are hurt. It's fine. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. It'll take a while, but I'll be able to walk out if you guide the way." Overall, I felt stupid. Yes, there were countless creatures lurking in the night that killed humans without a second thought. Some with bodies so horrible it would make you go crazy just by looking at them. And I just ran from one of the most harmless of the bunch. No, bad idea. We'll bring back help." The small creature lifted into the air along with the rest. I told them it was fine, but they ignored me. I was left at the bottom of a slope with a bad ankle and no idea of how to get out of the woods. No wonder why Nick said not to do jobs without him. He would never let me live this down. For once, my phone was working. I could call for someone to come and get me, or wait until the Fluttershades brought someone here to help out. Maybe the person they got wouldn't laugh at me. It took a while for them to come back. The one they brought wasn't going to laugh, but I really didn't want to see them while alone and with a bad ankle. My hand twitched, wanting to draw my gun. On top of the slope and looking down at me through a deer skull was the creature I saw last night. We looked at each other in silence. The Fluttershades were unaware of why bringing him might be a bad idea. As the tall, thin, false Wendigo started down the slope, my body acted on its own and backed up. My ankle was burning with pain. He stopped in front of me, looking down. In the light, I could see him clearly. His ribs were showing through nearly transparent white skin. A mess of dark hair spilled from under the deer skull. From how he wore the skull, I could see his chin and mouth. The skin on his face appeared as if it was scarred and he had no lips to speak of. So many sharp teeth were exposed in a grim frown. "Humans are always twisting their ankles. It's annoying," he said in a somewhat normal voice that I never would have expected from such a creature. "You can talk?" I asked slowly. He didn't respond. Getting down, he roughly took my foot to push back the jeans. The ankle was already swollen. I flinched and he didn't stop. As if he'd done it 100 times before, he found some sticks to tie around the ankle to keep it straight. Leaving me alone for a while, he came back with more branches fashioned into crutches. They looked uncomfortable to use, but it was something. "It is not broken, but you should not put weight on it. I do not have anything cool for the swelling. Going near the river or ponds would be a mistake. Come along, I'll show you out." He didn't even wait for me to get back up before leaving. I hobbled after him after I left behind some jerky for the Fluttershades as a thank you for finding help. Why are you being so friendly? Don't you eat people? I asked, finding it hard to keep up with him as we traveled along the gully. I eat meat. How are you able to see my kind? He said, not looking back. I'm a contract worker for the corporation. I replied. That got him to stop. From under his skull, I could feel him judging me. To change the subject, I went on. I'm here because Robin Rice requested I look into what killed those campers. I believe he has nothing to do with it. That also got his attention. He stopped walking again, his expression hidden behind his skull mask. I might have done something wrong by mentioning Robin's name. He stood utterly still, causing my muscles to tense in case I needed to run. It was moments like those when I considered a career change. Robin. His voice was soft as he repeated the word. It was the first time someone ever directly told him his son's name. The reaction was what made me fully trust him. Realizing that we had paused, he turned around again and hurried along. I needed to focus on carefully getting out of the gully without hurting myself again. Questions swarmed in my head and they needed to wait. My guide refused to keep talking no matter how much I tried to make him open up. We kept taking short breaks, not for my sake. Every time, he checked the wind before picking a direction. Do you have a name? I swear I'll shut up for a while if you tell me, I said during one of those pauses. Lake. True to my word, I stayed silent. Lake walked slowly so I could keep up. Something was bothering him. That much was easy to see. Robin's bad habit of chewing on his nails was passed down from his father. Lake's thumbnail was shredded from his sharp teeth. He still raised it to his mouth to press his teeth down on the nail, tempted to keep biting it. When he suddenly became tense and ducked down, I tried doing the same. Within a blink of an eye, he was well hidden inside some bushes, a skill I did not possess. Hiding behind a tree, I spotted what made him so alert. Another creature like himself was sulking around the woods. Wearing a bundle of smaller skulls on his head instead of a large one, he sniffed the air, looking for something. Some drool was coming from the corner of his mouth. I jumped when a cry came from the bushes Lake was in. When I was much younger, I spent time at my grandmother's place. On rare occasions we saw deer and heard them off in the woods. Lake was able to sound exactly like one. The cry was echoing through the trees, causing the other creature to freeze mid-step. For a moment, it considered coming our way. The eyes hidden under those skulls looked towards the tree I ducked behind. After a painful amount of time, it left us alone, running off into the trees further away, not caring about the noise it was making. When it was clear the other creature left, Lake came out of his hiding spot. I am puzzled over his reaction. Too many loose threads have been gathering up as of late. Lake spoke, almost to himself. I stood waiting for him to bounce ideas off of me. He really didn't want to talk to another person about what was rattling around in his head. And if he did, it wasn't with someone dumb enough to fall down a gully. In the end, he caved in and told me what he was thinking. My kind is always hungry. If he heard a deer and did not try to hunt it, it means he was after something else. My guess is he was looking for you, Lake said with his bone-thin arms crossed. Me. Aside from eating a tasty slow human, why would he be looking for me? And how would he even know I was here? The Fluttershades gossip. The entire forest knows you're here. As to why he is after you, I am uncertain. Many things do not fit together. Those agents that came before and took Robin were only here for a few hours. They became distracted by a disturbance within traveling distance. The creatures they are hunting are never this agitated. What happened to them, and why did it happen now? We both stopped to think. The sound of the leaves in the wind overhead gave the forest an almost peaceful feeling. After everything I've seen inside the woods, I'll never truly be comfortable being in them again. A distraction. Let's say the one who ate those campers got the agents somewhere else after they took Robin. If they don't eat someone again, then Robin would be guilty without any real proof. They might be setting up a scapegoat. I offered, for one single meal, unless it was a nomad creature, and none have been in these woods as of late, then it would not be worth the risk. We are given the right to eat lost humans that don't have any hope of rescue in the forest. It is all just meat. We would not put forth all this effort for one extra meal while plenty of deer roam and fish swim. Also, why would they distract agents to look for another? We were missing a few pieces of information for this all to make sense. Robin didn't do anything to them or even speak with these creatures. They would have no reason to frame him, aside from getting a free meal out of the deal. I trusted Lake wasn't lying or holding anything back when we spoke. It was a bit frustrating not knowing what this was all about. Some answers came in the worst way they could have. A pale shape tore through the bushes. Lake only had enough time to push me aside, causing my ankle to flare up in pain. The other creature was on top of him, teeth flying and claws out. By the time he threw the smaller one off, his body was cut and torn. Both got on all fours, hissing and yowling like demented foxes. Neither stood down as the battle cries got worse. Lake attacked first, his longer arms reaching the target, gouging into a frail body. I got back up, pain shooting through my leg. I drew my gun, watching for an opening as they rolled and fought, kicking up dirt. something caught my eye in the woods. More of these creatures similar to Lake were stalking through the trees. I fired a few warning shots that soon became less of a warning the closer they got. One slipped by me and tried to join the fight. Lake would soon be outnumbered. Catching one by the throat, his teeth tore through it, putting an end to one of them. His cuts were healing but not fast enough. The other creature was stunned by the sight of the blood long enough for Lake to land a hit on it. The thing let out a scream of pain and ran off. We didn't get a break. The creature that replaced the one that ran was double Lake's size. His thin frame was more muscular and he wore an assortment of human skulls. Some were broken apart and stuck together to cover his face. Lake was faster, getting ahead of any death blows. The target was bigger, so I was able to get a few lucky shots in. The skulls cracked every time a bullet hit. The larger creature darted back, wary of my gun. Flesh, stand down. We do not. Lake's words were cut off. I didn't fire fast enough. The larger creature barreled forwards, catching Lake with his shoulder and smashed him into a tree. Bones cracked. A branch tore through Lake's body, causing him to let out a garbled gasp of air. In a blind panic, I kept firing until my gun was empty. That did enough damage for the other creature to back off completely. He let out an ugly scream, blood gushing from where he was hit. With the rest of the creatures, he sulked back off into the forest to recover. I raced over to Lake, worried he was going to die. The branch went through his chest and punctured a lung. He needed to remove it before his healing kicked in. With a wheezing voice, he told me to grab his arm and pull as hard as I could to get him free. The sounds of the branch slowly exiting his body were ones I would hear in my nightmares. We both collapsed to the ground, one far worse than the other. Go, far. He was gasping deep, trying to get air into his one good lung. Unable to do much, I helped him on his back, refusing to listen to his request. I was not going to leave him behind in this kind of condition. The others could come back at any moment to finish us off. He saw my head shake and how I was too upset to say anything. Humans never listen, he wheezed. I took his hand as he drifted off. His wound was closing up at an accelerated pace. The life-threatening injury was repaired. The rest weren't even closing. All the small cuts and broken bones stayed. Normally, creatures didn't have any issues healing such minor things. Lake had used up all of his energy taking care of the biggest wounds, so the others would need to wait. I tried my phone to see if I could get someone here to help. No signal at all. I've heard supernatural creatures block out cell phones and computer signals. There were a lot of spells cast inside the corporation's office, so everything worked. Lake probably didn't even know what a cell phone was. There was no way he knew how to avoid messing with them. If I wanted a signal, I would need to leave him behind. There are still magazines left. I would keep watching until Lake woke up and we could leave together. The pale creatures were afraid of my weapon. There was no sight of them the entire day. When it started to get dark, I could see them at a distance trying to hide. My ankle was well enough to move around on. I quickly lit a fire that would let me see when they got closer. My eyes were useless in the dark. As the sun set and the forest became darker, Lake stirred. He finally sat up, still scarred and bruised from the fight. You should have left, he said angrily, his voice revealing how bad off he was. Robin came here because he wanted to see what kind of person his biological father is. I refused to give up on that happening, I replied sternly. Gun in hand, I raised it when the bigger creature came into view. His wound had healed, but the skulls were still cracked. And there it is, the reason for all of this. That boy coming here was a mistake. I almost pulled the trigger, but Lake stood up, his arm raised to stop me. He wanted to learn what was going on more than he wanted the other creature dead. Flesh, we are brothers. I deserve some answers. Cackling mingled with chirping came from the darkness. The weak firelight flicked, making Flesh appear larger than he was. A growl came from his throat, filled with anger over that truth. I assumed Lake was the leader despite his smaller size, and that Flesh wanted to kill him and take his place. But what did Robin have to do with all of this? By blood, that boy is also our family, a part of our tribe. How vile. So vile it pains my bones. Our tribe is only as strong as our weakest member, and he isn't even a full creature. Barely even eats any meat. Has never hunted before. How dare that thing be a part of us? Neither of them paid much attention to what I was doing. I'd taken out my phone to use as a flashlight in case one of the other creatures got closer. But I got an idea to use it for something else instead. There was no reason to kill and bring agents down on us. And what was your plan for this one? If he dies here, Lake's words got cut off. His much larger brother got in close. A smile appeared under the bundle of skulls. He couldn't contain himself. He needed to show off his plan, confident no one could stop him. We can easily make it appear that you two killed each other. Then we would be rid of the two weakest links in this tribe. I would finally take my rightful place and put you in the ground at the same time. From what I've heard, the agents kill guilty creatures. How long would your bastard of a son last for until he joins his mother? Every muscle in Lake's body tensed. His long fingers curled into fists, and his shoulders started to shake. I couldn't see his face, but the half of Flesh's expression was all I needed. Letting out a shrieking laugh, he got right in his smaller brother's face, mouth open so wide it might as well be an endless pit of teeth. "Oh, didn't you know she died? Or were you waiting for her to return this entire time? All that time you spent gazing off expecting for her to come walking back is your weakness." Flesh was unable to hide his glee at being able to get all of this out in the open. "How would you know she?" Lake asked in a small voice. "You promised to wait for her." "I held no such thing. I followed her, and I watched as she came back here, belly all swollen with your mistake. Humans took her to a place of healing and she died there. Her body moved without the child. I followed that body, and I found out human doors are easily broken down. That one meal was the sweetest I've ever tasted in my lifetime." I expected Lake to lash out, to get angry over what he was hearing. His body slowly eased up. His shaking stopped and he appeared far too calm as his brother cackled. Pale creatures got closer as I raised my gun in defense. They backed up knowing what it could do. As I was distracted, Lake moved. He was too fast for any of us to follow. With a strength he had not shown before, he forced Flesh's body into the ground, on his back, and with Lake's foot digging into his gut. "Your anger has always been your weakness, along with being unable to accept anything unless it pleases you. You did all of this to take my title. If you wanted it, all you needed to do was to win in a fight against me. So, fight." His voice was so calm it was eerie. With a roar, Flesh got back to his feet, throwing off his brother, but Lake landed on all fours. His slim figure darted away, too fast to get caught. No matter how hard Flesh tried, his larger body wouldn't move the way he wanted. Soon he was frustrated beyond reason. Each missed blow hit a tree, exploding half of it into splinters. His fists and claws were quickly becoming a bloody mess. In the chaos, I lost track of Lake. I let out a small yelp of fear when someone wrapped an arm around my neck from behind. I struggled, but it was impossible to get out of that iron grip. "Human, offered meat is sacred. It'll give me the strength I need to finish this. Give me something of yourself so that I may save my son." When I heard Lake's voice, I calmed down. What he said made my heart start to race again. Flesh noticed us and moved, each step causing the ground to rumble. He said I needed to offer something, but he wasn't giving me much of a choice. I wasn't aware of what he would take, but I nodded. The moment after permission was given, sharp teeth ripped into my left ear, tearing the bottom off. I let out a scream of pain and surprise. Warm blood flowed as Lake relaxed his arm. Flesh stopped, but it was far too late. By the time he was turning away, Lake became something else entirely just from eating a part of my ear. My head was swimming from fear and pain and I couldn't see clearly. I was moved aside as a tall and very thin creature ran past on all fours. With one eye closed in pain, and through the very dim firelight, I tried to see what was happening. A creature with a face now fused with the deer's skull crashed down on Flesh. It was half as tall as the trees around it. As it moved, branches snapped and came raining down. The part of its face that was exposed under the chin of the skull revealed a mouth with countless teeth. He could have easily used them to rip his brother apart. Instead, he used his claws. A bellowing sound echoing through the forest from the monster caused my good ear to ring. He twisted off Flesh's limbs, tossing them aside. He refused to eat the other creature. To consume him as food gave him respect. Just scattering him through the woods to rot was the worst thing Lake could think of doing. Either fear or blood loss made me pass out. My body fell hard on the ground. Sharp rocks dug into my side to create bruises for later. What woke me up was a concerned and unfamiliar voice, and a hand lightly slapping the side of my face. My eyes opened and a blinding light flooded my vision. I was shocked to find I'd slept until morning. 2 men in suits were on their knees, helping me get back up. One went right to work cleaning up my very sore ear. These 2 agents I'd never met before. They really didn't expect to see someone else from the corporation after they came back to the woods. They sensed a surge in magic, so they came as fast as possible to see what it was. Blake gave himself up, and everything returned to normal. As a precaution, they bound his hands. He sat looking like how he did when we first met, watching them fuss over me. It was a bit embarrassing. Blake wanted to go see Robin, and we needed to report everything that had happened. I refused to go to a hospital as I just wanted to go sort this all out first. The 2 agents dropped us off at the holding building. 526 met us there, his face pale when he saw what condition I was in. He was able to get the one overseeing Robin's case for a meeting within an hour of our arrival. Finally, all of us were inside a room and started to go over everything. Someone who I assumed to have a similar role as a judge sat with us. Robin had a guard next to him and looked as bad as I felt. I was beside Lake, who was still bound. My ear hurt as much as my ankle by that point. I was about to start speaking when Lake bowed at the waist towards the judge. "I ate those campers. Robin has nothing to do with it. Please release him." My mouth dropped open. After everything that happened, this is what he was going to do. Robin let out a sound, his hands covering his mouth as if he was going to be ill. This entire time he worried he came from a monster, and now his father was proving it. I could say that Lake was lying and tell them about Flesh and his plan. But without proof, it was really not as strong as a confession. That was why Lake let himself be brought here. He only wanted his son to be free. If that's true, then the judge started. I fumbled with my pocket, yanking out my phone, nearly dropping it. Lake looked over, still bowing and not understanding what I was doing. I turned up the volume to the max and started to play the video I'd recorded earlier. The phone was in my hand, which muffled the audio a bit, and there wasn't much in the way of visual proof, but Flesh's voice was recorded admitting to being the one who killed the campers to pin the blame on Robin. I stopped the video before Robin heard about his mother's body being stolen. "What kind of magic did you use to capture his voice like this?" Lake asked, so stunned he still hadn't straightened up. "It's just a cell phone. Don't worry about it," I said, very tired from the entire night. That evidence and my testimony was enough to get them both released. My phone needed to be taken away for a while to ensure I didn't make the video with some sort of magic. Lake and Robin met me in the lobby, waiting for someone to arrive and take them home. From how far away they stood from each other, I could tell they didn't speak while I was gone. "Skylar, you." Robin started looking over the band-aid over my ear. I nudged him, not caring about myself right then. "Go talk to him," because he felt like he owed me. Robin nodded. He forced himself to stand in front of his biological father but didn't know what to say. Too many questions caused him to hesitate. For the most part, I could see he wanted to ask about his mother, and if it was her choice to have him or not. "You look like her," Lake said to fill the silence. That one statement and how he said it was all Robin needed. His parents loved each other. One was a man-eating monster and his mother loved him regardless. His eyes filled with tears and he smiled, finally rid of what had haunted him for so long. Robin planned on still volunteering in the summers. He was never going to forsake humans to go live with his father, but now he knew more of where he came from. I promised I would make time to see them again someday. I got back to my apartment after a trip to the doctor. A half-missing ear would be an adjustment. The corporation said they could fix it to make it look like new, but the cost was far too much. I could leave it half missing. If I was an agent, medical care wouldn't cost an arm and a leg. I'd slept for almost a whole day. My body needed it. Without my phone still, I couldn't get distracted trying to work. But that caused me to completely forget to see if Nick ever replied to my messages. Frantic knocking at my door woke me up. It lasted the entire time it took to walk over to the front door to open it. On the other side was a very stressed out Nicky. For some reason his suit was covered in fine glitter and his arm was in a sling. There was a story behind what kind of job he was doing while I was off in the woods. "What's with the glitter, snickerdoodle?" I asked, knowing I needed to break out some sweet talk to calm him down. "I don't want to talk about it," he replied so quickly I wasn't even finished speaking. His reaction made me want to laugh. I kept it in for his sake. "You promised you would call me if you got a dangerous job," Nick reminded me. "I did. You just weren't available. And it wasn't dangerous to start with. Things just got weird after I twisted my ankle. I made it out all right. The new ear thing makes me look cool." I shrugged, which hurt. The padding was rubbing and needed to be cleaned up. Very carefully. Nick placed both hands on my cheeks to stare his dark eyes into my own. I've never seen him freak out this much. His voice still sounded calm. If I hadn't known him so well, I wouldn't be able to tell he was internally screaming. "Don't ever try and be cool again," Nick whispered, and it chilled my spine. He didn't even let go of my face until I nodded. He dropped his hands, replacing the one arm back into the sling. I didn't blame him for being upset, but I didn't think he could be this intimidating. He was an agent after all. His job was fighting and killing monsters. It was the first time he turned that kind of tone on his partner. All those feelings faded when he bent over to pick up a cloth bag from the floor, pulling out a stuffed toy. He offered it to me. "Would you like this?" he asked, his voice returning to normal. He was holding out a stuffed carrot wearing plaid shorts. It was the worst toy I've ever seen. The beady eyes had a dreadful, yet knowing look to them at the same time. I hated and loved the thing simultaneously and gladly accepted it. "Where did you find something like this?" I asked, looking it over. "I don't want to talk about it," he said for a second time, sounding almost haunted by the memory. "Really? What happened with him while I was busy?" I let him inside so I could go over my job. He listened and refused to go into what he was doing, or explain the glitter shedding off his suit that I would never stop finding in my apartment. It got late, so I let him crash on the couch. He helped clean up my ear and put on new padding. I wasn't tired but went to bed anyway. At some point I fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, sensing someone else in the room with me. I'd placed the carrot on my bed and I had to flip it so the face was against the pillow. After all the jobs I've done, a missing part of my ear was a pretty minor injury. I've yet to break a bone, which I was proud of. In fact, I hadn't broken a bone until that point. I'd gotten out of bed unaware that Nick sleepwalks. He wasn't even aware of it. He'd curled up beside my bed and in the dark, I tripped over him. I bounced off my bedside table, landing wrong on my arm. Through the pain, I was laughing at the expression on his face when he turned on the light to see me on the floor with a red and swelling wrist. He did not see the humor in it. With his benefits, I was able to get my wrist looked at that night. The sprain turned out to be a fracture that my partner would never forgive himself for. I was given something that would heal it up in a week. In that time, I would be unable to do any cases and had to wear an arm brace. They thought a cast might be too much. A few agents and everyone else I knew asked about what happened. To respect my partner's honor, I answered with a vague, "I don't want to talk about it."